Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to another edition of Beverly's Times Past. My name is Ed Josephs. Well, when we think of the 4th of July, perhaps we might think of some backyard cookouts, perhaps a day at the beach, perhaps we might even go down to Lynch Park and see some fireworks. But back in the 1930s, and then again in the 1950s, the citizens of Beverly had yet another attraction to look forward to. And that was the huge bonfire that was held in those years up in North Beverly. And tonight we have three people with us who know a little bit about those days and times. We have, of course, my good friend over on my far right, Mr. Richard Symmes, who is our co-host on Beverly's Times Past, World War II Remembered. And Dick is an author of a fine book called North Beverly Remembered. Next to Dick we have Bob Atherton, a retired Beverly fire inspector and presently the owner of a family farm stand up in North Beverly. And old friend Donald Goucher, who has been with us before on Beverly's Times Past in connection with his World War II exploits. Don is the former veterans agent at City Hall. Welcome to you all tonight. Dick, we have Bob and Don, two real experts in the field of bonfires, so to speak, because Don, having grown up in the 30s, was able to witness the 1935 through 1940 series of fires, and Bob Atherton here was one of the instigators and builders of the fires that took place in 53, 4, and 5. So perhaps, Dick, if you'd like to start talking and chatting with Bob, we could get his background.
Sure. Bob, nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
If you could you just tell us briefly about your childhood, the early years in North Beverly, where you went to school and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was born in Beverly, been here all my life, born over in the Rouse Side section, 1935. Moved to North Beverly around 38, 39. I attended the Brown School up until grade 5, and then they transferred me to McKay School. At that time, approximately, was probably in the late 40s, they built 128 through, and everybody lived on the south side on 128, had to go to McKay School. Mm-hmm. So I went to McKay School for 2 years, and then I went to 2 years at Briscoe, and then 3 years at Beverly High School. Went in the service 1955 till 57. Spent a year and a half in Germany. In 1960, I went on the fire department and stayed on the fire department until I retired in 1990, and which for the last 10 years I was a City of Beverly fire inspector.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Don, we've had you here before. Perhaps you could just briefly go over your early childhood years.
Well, I was born in Lynn. I grew up in North Beverly here. On Ellsworth Avenue. I went to the Brown School for 7 years, and from there I went to Briscoe, the old Briscoe,
right.
And then from there to Beverly High School, and then into the service for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I was a veterans agent for the City of Beverly for 20 years.
20 years,
Yeah.
Good enough. Ted?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go back to the very beginnings. As we said earlier, the first bonfires that we know of were in the 1930s, 35 through 1940. And Don, you told us that you were a young man growing up in the North Beverly area. Can you kind of relate to us maybe some of your memories of those days, seeing those fires, where they were built, and the people that came to see them and so on?
Well, the first one I remember was this one here. And the way I remember it, we had collected Christmas trees Christmas before and had them in a pit in back of my house, and we were told just before 4th of July that we would get rid of them. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a bonfire.
This is the 1935.
1935
the first one of the series.
So we collected them all, and the grown-ups, I guess, apparently thought it was a pretty good idea, so they started collecting stuff and throwing it on the pile too. And this was the one that we wound up with. And as I remember it, I know it was in this field here, out in back of my house, right in here.
Okay, now what streets are we referring to?
This is Clifton Avenue here, and this is Ellsworth Avenue.
Okay.
Tremont Street was here, and Scott Street. Well, County Way is over here. Henry's Market is here now.
Uh-huh. In those days, of course, it was just open, vacant fields up in there. that
Yes, yeah, this was all open,
Yep.
open land. This was a nursery here.
area. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, today, where would we place that fire today if we were to reference it today? Is it up behind the flare cleaning
No,
place? Not up in that
that's
area.
not where I remember this particular one being.
Okay.
It would
So
be
the later on
the,
ones come up
The later
behind
ones
flare.
would have been.
Okay. Dick,
back
when
of
we
flare.
included this picture of the 35 fire in our North Beverly Remembered series on times past, we kind of chuckled at the scene there. First of all, the fellow looks entirely pleased with himself, and
Right.
secondly, the stack itself, as Don said, is rather haphazardly put together.
And it really was, as we just learned, nothing more than a pile of rubble that was all put together, odds and ends and scrap and old Christmas trees, and
Right.
so that's where you get that appearance
And the
from.
way I remember it, some of the other kids tried to set it on fire before the 4th of July. So they finally put a fireman on duty to watch it.
Bob Atherton, do you know who that fellow is in that picture?
I think I can identify him. Yeah, that fella spent at least 35 years in the Beverly Fire Department. His name was Jimmy Leahy. I think he was a call fireman for years, and then he was appointed a permanent. But that is Jimmy Leahy. I'm almost positive today he has passed away. He was a grand old guy. I can see him sitting up in front of the North Beverly Fire Station, the old bench for years.
Yeah.
I know that's him.
Yeah. Of course, prior to 35, we really have no record or knowledge of previous bonfires, but we might assume, Dick Symmes, that there were bonfires held at various locations at various
It's
times.
possible. In fact, if anybody has knowledge of that, they might want to get in touch with the Beverly Historical Society and let us know about it, because it would be interesting to document anything like that went on prior to those years.
Yeah. Well, now, Don Goucher, we're going to take a look at the 1936 bonfire up in North Beverly.
Yep, that was this one here, and that one was it was the first year they started using barrels to build the fires, and this one was 80 feet high, and everything went off real well when they set it off.
So the 35 fire really was a put-together, as we said, haphazard collection
Right.
of whatever was
Junk.
available.
Yeah.
And they began to become professional in 1936.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And now let's take a look at the 37 picture that you
37.
have there in your hand.
The 37 bonfire was, well, both of these were put up by the 7-4 Club. In fact, all of these were, except the first one. The 1937 bonfire was 96 feet high, so it went up 16 feet, from what I understand. And the base was a little wider. And once again, it went off real good when they touched the thing off. It burned great.
Now, how
I guess-
old would you have been when these fires were going off? You said
I was either 11 or 12
years
on the
old.
first one, 1935, so take it from there. Yeah,
Okay, so you were purely a witness to this whole
right,
affair.
right. We did watch them, we went down and watched them build these things, and, but we didn't have really too much to do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And Don, excuse me, where were these fires? These were not
These-
where the first one was, is that correct?
No, it was out in back of where the Fleet Bank is now.
I see, right opposite the North Beverly Fire Station.
Right, right,
Okay.
in the field out there.
Right.
Yeah, and the 1938 fire was this one, and that one seems a little narrower, but it was quite a bit higher. 1938 fire was 110 feet high. And once again, well, I guess they were passing out ice creams to all the kids and American flags and this sort of thing.
Now, were
So-
these fires held, as you recall, on the night of the 4th? Or?
No, the night before.
The night before.
Usually, yes.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Bob Atherton, who were some of the guys involved with these fires back in the 30s? You have a list there for us?
I had put a call into Dean Palmer, who used to was the fire chief in the city of Beverly. And Dean and a lot of his friends years ago used to work on all these old bonfires. This was the 1935 to 1940 series. And he was telling me in the 1935, he said they cleaned out the old First National store in Beverly and got all the old boxes and stuff, and that's why you see the pile of rubble. They used all this, they got a lot of it out of the old box. And they used to meet in what they call Lovett's Barn, which is across from the fire station. There used to be an old barn there, right where the Fleet Bank is now. And they used to call themselves the Fur, Fish, and Game Club. And they used that name for a couple of years. And then they went to the 7-4 Club, which would be July 4th, because that's why they call it the 7-4 Club. Now, some of the gentlemen and some of the names, these are all names. Some of these people are still around, some of them have deceased, but I like to, some of them would have been Richard Johnson and Steve Johnson, Lloyd Golding, who at one time used to own the Shell station across from the fire station, Dan Purley, Jim Leahy, A.J. Poole, Ford Brewer, Donnie Goucher, I got Donnie's name on here, and the Palmer brothers. There was Tom Palmer, Dean Palmer, and John Palmer, and all of them used to be involved with them, the 35 to 40 series.
I see. I see. Well, down on the screen we have the 39 fire. Do you have a picture of
Yep,
us?
I have the 39 fire. Incidentally, my aunt and uncle and my cousins lived right, their house was where that barn was.
Yep.
The barn was out and back. Let's see, the 1938 one, no, the 1939 one we want, do we?
Right.
And the 1939 bonfire was 115 feet high. And once again, they were passing out ice creams and so forth to all the kids, and American flags. And
Let's take
that
a look,
one
let's
went
take a look at the 1940.
the 1940 fire was the biggest one of all. It burned the best of all, I guess. It appeared to me. And that one was 106 feet high. It was not as high as the other one, but it was much wider. And I guess they built these in stages, didn't they? So the fire, when it dropped in, would drop just so far.
That was the idea.
That would
of
burn
building
through,
them.
and then it would drop down a little farther.
If it dropped outside, we didn't do the job right.
Yeah,
That's all. That's
right,
what happened.
right.
Now, Dick Symmes along comes 1940 and World War II, 41, and the bonfires ceased to be.
Yeah, I would imagine that's pretty obvious because you can't have a big fire in the sky when there's blackouts going on and danger of air raids, or at least they thought so.
Right.
So that, plus the fact that, you know, certainly the country was in no mood to celebrate anything like that during the war years.
Right. Now, before the big one started up again, Bob, in 1953, your dad had something going up there, did he not?
Yes, he. It used to be because we lived at 12 Dodge Street in North Beverly. That was the house right next to the old cotton mill. It used to be the first cotton mill in America. That was a duplex house. When I moved from Rouse Side, we moved in there. And across the street used to be an open field, which now there's a house in there because the house next to the old North Beverly Variety Store, they moved up. So my father used to, at that time, was running the Shell station. He bought it from Lloyd Golding. And he used to plan 4th of July parties, and he'd organize a Horribles parade, and we'd pile a bunch of rubble in the field there then. This was leading up to the 1953 fires. And he'd have Horribles parades, and they used to march, and some of it was sponsored by the North Beverly Men's Club too, I think. And they used to march around up Cabot Street and down Corner Street and end at the field there, and I could see my father now handing out money out of his pocket to the winners of the different categories of the Horribles parades. And they used to have a grand old time. Because there was plenty of fireworks around back then. Everybody had fireworks. In fact, they were selling them. They used to have little stands, and I think Dick used to be a little stand in front of your father's place up Cabot Street.
Yeah, my dad sold fireworks, among other things. Yep.
Yep.
So now we're talking post-World War II, in the late 40s, maybe?
Yeah, this would be the late 40s, 47, 48, yeah, post-World War II.
Okay,
yeah.
so you are approaching your high school years. In fact, maybe are in high school at this point in time.
Yeah, we'd be getting close to it.
Yeah. Now, did any of this, I'm sure it did, but I'll ask the question anyway, did any of this kind of inspire you and a few other people to get it going again full-time?
Oh, I think so. I think a lot of the gentlemen that built the original fires from 35 to 40 were on the fire department working down at the North Beverly Fire Station. Because as kids, we all hung around the fire station, and we used to, even when the truck went out, we used to jump on the bed. They used to let us jump on the back of the truck, and we could respond to the fires, and we'd actually put them out there. Back then, it was mostly grass and brush fires because there was a lot of open land around.
Yeah.
But we were all SPACs, and we hung around there, all of us, and that was the gang. And I can remember the first TV in North Beverly was in the fire station, and Friday night fights. You had to go in and see Friday night fights. Was back with Joe Lewis and all them guys.
Absolutely.
The only place that had a TV was in the fire station.
I believe the Gillette company,
Yeah, Gillette.
Razor Blade sponsored
Right,
them. Yeah,
right.
sure.
And that front room up in that fire station used to be mobbed on a Friday night.
Now, as we noted with Dawn's series of pictures of the 1930 fires, the style became more professional as the years went by. Tell us about these barrels, Bob, and how did you go about procuring them and all of that?
Well, we made some connections with a couple of people that worked over to the leather factories in Peabody. One off the top of my head was Flynn Leather, or Flynn Tannery. And we used to give these guys a little refreshments, maybe a half a pint or something like that, and hold the barrels for us. These were the yard men over in these tanneries, and that's how we got to go over and get them over there to build the fires that we started in '53.
They weighed a few pounds, did they not, these barrels?
The hogshead barrels weighed almost 75 pounds. They were heavy. They were up to my neck anyways, they were that high, you know.
Yeah. So come 1953, as the spring comes along, approaching the 4th of July, who besides yourself now got interested in getting this thing going again?
Well, back then we were organized as the North Beverly Boys Club, and we used to meet behind, used to be Your Market, which was on Cabot Street. There used to be two markets back then. It was Henry's on the other, right on the corner, and Your Market was on Cabot Street, which was right behind the fire station. And out behind there was a big two-car garage, and we had that boys club. We always met in there. And of course, some of the firemen that are still on used to try to get us going. Said, what do you say, you guys? Let's get these fires going again. We'll start you, help you. So that's how it started again in 1953, and it was just a whole new crew, and it was strictly from the North Beverly Boys Club.
Yeah. A few names. Can you recall a few of the names that fellows that worked with you?
Yeah, there was quite a few guys there. There was Dick Tucker, a kid named George Wilder, who was an excellent man building bonfires. He come up from Virginia, and I don't know where he went after. He worked with us for 2 or 3 years on these bonfires, and he disappeared. There was Jack Bradley, and there was Bob Bradley. There was I'm thinking of
Good old North Beverly.
good old
names.
North Beverly,
Right,
little
right.
names.
So these fellas, plus yourself, as the instigators, got together, and we had our first, as we're looking at now, our first revival of the bonfire, 1953, 4th of July.
That's right.
And this was in the field where the North Beverly Plaza is now?
This was in the field where the North Beverly Plaza is now. There used to be a big sign up there. That was going to be the future site of the
Jordan
North
Marsh.
Shore Shopping
Yeah,
Center,
yeah,
Jordan
Jordan
Marsh,
Marsh, right.
which never took place. But
That
that's where we
also
started.
was a site of a dump, was it not, Bob? In the
Yeah,
older
that was a
days.
city dump for years. I think just 2 or 3 years before that, they had filled it in and capped it over,
Uh-huh.
and there was just a bunch of weeds growing out of it. And
Okay. Richard, you want to jump
Right,
in
so
here?
now, 1953, you're going to do this. How do you start? How do you go about building one of these things? For those of us who have never seen it done, how is it done? Can you take us right through the construction?
Well, in 1953, again, we were rookies just like they were in 1935. We started, here's a picture right here, we started with, again, with railroad ties at the bottom. Railroad ties, availability of them was easy. We could get them everywhere. And we started the bottom frame with railroad ties. We built it up probably 15, 20 feet. And then we built a platform on top of that. And then we started with the hog-head barrels. And we went up that year, I think around 70 or 80 feet in 1953.
So you had a
Finished it.
modest beginning then.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yep.
that was successful, and this led to the much bigger ones
Yep.
that I remember.
Yep.
Yeah. And those that had no railroad ties, how were those built?
In 1954 now, we started with it was an all-barrel fire, and we started with the first tier. We used to double the first tier, and the first tier would probably have 70 or 80 barrels in it. And the big thing with a bonfire is getting that first tier level. And sometimes it took 2 or 3 days to get that first tier perfectly level. You had to have it just so that, once you go up, you have some problems if you don't have it to start with. So anyways, we started with the first tier with about 70 barrels, and the second tier is a critical tier too. We might have dropped a couple of barrels, but we would start with the second tier. And then from then on, we could move along and go right up until we get up to where we wanted to get.
Now, was there some centerpiece that held all this together?
Yeah, we used to start with let's get the telephone company to put in a telephone pole in the ground for us.
Mhm.
And that was like a ridge pole for us, and we used to use that as our bracing point. As we went up, we would tie into that pole and work our way up until we got to the top of the pole, and then when we got to the top of the pole, we'd scab and go up further until we got to the top of the stack.
Right. So you're ending up a lot higher than a normal telephone pole is today with these
Yes.
things, right?
Yeah.
Now, how big would you say in diameter did you end up with when you got these bigger fires going? What was the circle footprint on the ground of one of these large fires, would you estimate?
Oh, I don't know, Dick. They were
Say 25, 30 feet across?
easy, more than
Mhm.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would
So-
say probably close to 40, 50 feet.
So
across,
that's the size of somebody's foundation on their house, if not bigger.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Don, do you recall any of these fires? Now, of course, you're
The ones in the 50s?
after you're a veteran, and you're probably married at this point in time.
Right. Yeah, no, we
A little too old to go climbing on the barrels.
no, I went down and watched the fires.
You did?
They were burning, sure.
Yeah.
And we used to take our kids down to see them.
Yeah.
Some of them, yeah. They were pretty small, but
Yeah.
we used to go.
A great event. Richard, I can't imagine, well, I can't imagine because I used to see them myself, the fun of it all, just going down there, anticipating this huge blaze it's about to ignite, and which can be seen literally for miles around, you know. And those were real exciting events,
Oh,
4th
yeah.
of July, to go along with the fireworks at West Beach and,
Right.
you know, family, as we said earlier, the family gatherings and all. Those were the days when the 4th of July really and truly was celebrated.
Yeah.
Not so much so today.
Yeah, and it was a real neighborhood thing. It really was. Sure, it drew a lot of people from outside the area, but it still was a neighborhood affair. I mean, the building of it certainly was, and the nucleus of the whole celebration was a neighborhood affair.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back just a little bit more to the construction angle on these things. Now, you guys, you're all amateurs. I mean, you started out doing this stuff, and before you know it, you're up 40, 50 feet in the air here on these flimsy barrels. Somebody must have really known what they were doing. I mean, you had to lift these things up with some kind of a block and tackle rig. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, in 1953, we found out who the climbers were. There was like 4 of us, and like I say, in 1953, and we started under the North Beverly Boys Club. When we got to 1954, we were reorganized under the North Beverly Community Club, and they would conduct raffles and all kinds of things to get a few dollars in. In fact, back then, I think the city of Beverly was handing out money to different wards in the city for 4th of July celebrations, and we were able to pick that up. So we contacted Lloyd's of London, and we got insurance on. There was 4 of us that what they call the top climbers, because we did it in '53. So we were the ones that were up the top, and nobody else was allowed to go up with the bonfire. We had plenty of help on the ground, but there was like 4 of us that really did the work up top.
Now, how did you elevate yourself, tier by tier?
As we went up, Bobby, every 4 or 5 tier, we would build a platform, solid wood.
This was inside?
This was inside. So that when we hauled the barrels up, the hogshead barrels, because we had a big pulley, and we used to move that up as we went. We could bring the barrels up, and then we could lay it on this platform, and then we could move it to wherever we wanted to place it on the outside perimeter of the fire.
Now, you mentioned scabbing a minute ago. What was that all about, Bob?
Well, the stays on the barrels, we used to break a barrel, and we could take the stays, that's the outside of the barrel, and we used to crisscross them inside, from one barrel to the other, just like that. And that would hold the barrels together inside. You couldn't see it from the outside, but all the barrels were staved together. So it was we used plenty of nails, believe me. We had nails all over the place. And a lot of that stuff was, back then, if I remember, a lot of it was donated. We had some great people who used to donate, and I could see people backing in there now, dropping off beautiful pieces of lumber, 2x6s, 2x8s, to help to build a bonfire, and we use that all inside.
Yeah, for the staging and so forth
Staging,
inside.
yeah. There's a lot of stock.
This had to be kind of dangerous up there, with the wind sometimes blowing to and fro,
Yeah,
and you're, what, 80 feet in the air?
when we get up in that 54 fire, we get up near the top, that thing was swaying almost 2 feet back and forth. And we felt good as long as it was swaying. If it was rigid, we'd be worried. And
Why is that?
we just figured it was rigid. It's apt to come down. As long as it was moving, we were fine.
So like an airplane wing
Yeah.
needs to flex a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So as we look at these fires, the progression of them, the 53, and now we see on the screen the 54 fire, and we'll take a peek at the 55 affair. They got bigger and bigger, Bob? Is that somewhat the idea?
Yeah, in the 53, we were up about 100 feet. And then in 1954, that was the granddaddy of them all. I think that was the biggest fire they've ever had. We used to, back then, they were having bonfires in Salem, a place called Gallows Hill. Some of you people can remember it. And we used to try to outdo them. We knew they had a fire 110, 115 feet. We wanted to go 120 feet. We wanted to make it a little bigger.
Yeah.
So,
We mentioned earlier about the procuring of the barrels from the tanneries in Peabody. Now, this must have been a major task in itself. Did you have a series of trucks that would go back and forth, picking them up, a few at a time, or?
yeah, we had, like I say, there was a ground crew working with us all the time, at least 10 or 15 guys. Every evening we would work on the fire. All weekends we'd work on the fire. And we had 3 or 4 trucks, rack body trucks, either local contractors, and I think a couple of years even the city of Beverly donated a truck and a driver. And we used to go back and forth to Peabody. I didn't go, but most of them went over there because I'd be working on the fire, and they'd make 2 or 3 trips a night just bringing barrels.
Yeah. All you could haul for free?
Yeah, all you could haul for free.
Uh-huh.
And them barrels are so big, like I say, you can't get many on a load. I can remember they were lucky to get 12, 15 at a time,
Yeah.
because they do take up a lot of space.
Now, once again, why was the location chosen, as we said earlier, the present North Beverly Shopping Plaza? Why was that location chosen? Just simply because it was a field and an area that was wide open?
Yeah, we just figured that was the ideal spot to view the fire. It was a wide open spot, and at that time the highway had just come through there, and
Route
128. 128.
Yeah.
We figured that would attract a crowd on the backside there.
Uh-huh.
They could sit along the ramp there, and we had excellent water supply there,
Yeah.
which was good because they used a lot of water when they had the dump there. So we just figured it was a great spot. And,
Now, as we look at the plaza today, Bob Atherton, where within the structure of the buildings would the fires have been built?
I would say it's just approximately just about where, if you're familiar with CVS, which sits on the back side of the plaza, I would say just about where CVS is where that bonfire was.
And the crowds would gather along Dodge Street, and as you say, up on Route 128, in the thousands, I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
Towards the end of it there.
The 54 fire, we were up close to 10,000, and I don't know, and if in 1954, I just can't imagine how many people were there. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
When that fire finally went off, it just illuminates the sky, and you could look around and just a glow of everybody. There's people everywhere. You just couldn't believe it. Just imagine. It was just quite a thrill to see everybody.
9 o'clock would be the time, or?
Yeah, approximately.
thereabouts?
I think it was around 9
As soon
or
as it was
9:30,
dark.
we would set them off.
And how did you ignite the fire?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had a lot of funny things happen with that. That's a long story, but the first year, 1953, we used the standard method. We kept the pulley because the pulley was always in there inside the bonfire, and
That would be sacrificed to
that
the
would be
fire.
sacrificed for the fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd get a bunch of rags and tie it, put it on the rope, and pull it up. And because we had gone up the top previously and ignited, soaked all the top barrels of gasoline. So when that rag went up and got near that point, it would just take off from the fumes. Now, in 1953, the club hired, this was North Beverly Community Club, they hired somebody that was a bow and arrow specialist, and they were going to try to ignite the fire with a bow and arrow, with a flaming arrow.